So here's the best reason why MULN is going to squeeze this week. I like the God pill indicator, but like, if you don't know God pill. So the vote is, I believe, on Tuesday. Let me check real quick. What is it, July 26th? Yeah, so the vote should be on Tuesday. And if you look at the shills and like the people on Twitter telling you to sell MULN, there's a lot. I mean, there's at least a dozen of them. And they post often. And what do they post about? They post about David McRae being a liar and a bad CEO, a person that has illegal dealings in the past, in court dealings, and they try to paint him as a scam artist. Now, the only way that he can shut all that down, if you remember back in March, he said he was delivering 25,000 vans at the end of June. And so, if there are some modifications that need to be made, like maybe they're still just holding on to the vans, but there's no question those vans are already built. So him announcing that and announcing whether, like, even if they need the modifications still and haven't been delivered yet, like, that would shut all that down. But that's not going to happen. They're not going to help us squeeze. So what's the next thing that they say? Really, the only other thing that they say, well, they say that everyone's selling whenever it dips, but we always get more dilution numbers, so we know that's a lie. But other than that, attacking the stock price and attacking David, the only other thing that they really do is talk about the dilution vote and how it's going to send the stock down to 30 cents, which it would if it got approved. Now, we've only seen in modern day, at least since social media has been active, one other time where the entire float became diluted into a squeeze. GME squoze, and it still had 200 million shares it could have diluted. They let GME squeeze. AMC, before GME even was known by anybody, before Boring Kitty was even talking about GME on YouTube, AMC had already diluted its first 100 million shares at under $2. Now, it took a year and a half from that time. The same time for us would be March 14th, when we got an announcement of 150 million shares of dilution. That was our first dilution announcement, 20 million to 150 million. It's been 5 months for us. There were people that bought an AMC. Granted, they bought at $2, and in 8 months, they finally stayed above $5. But, like, this went way faster. This was pretty sweet. And so, the point is that it's the only time it's ever happened. And we know that a bunch of AMC investors are also invested in MULN. Absolutely no reason they wouldn't be. And if you look at the social media, I did a poll, and it was 90% hell no to the dilution with 350 votes. You don't get many MULN interactions on YouTube or on Twitter with over 350 interactions. So the point is that retail knows, and they'll never give them dilution. AMC took dilution off the table before the vote because they were getting so much they were getting so many votes of no. And they knew they weren't going to get it. And so they took back their promise that they weren't going to dilute certain shares, and they ended up diluting them anyways. And they justified it because they said retail wouldn't give them dilution. And so it allowed them to drag it out for 2 more months. Well, if AMC went no on dilution, and we know it was owned by retail, and we also know that MULN is owned by retail, then we know that MULN is voting no on dilution, and they know it too. They already know it. They've seen you guys' no votes. A lot of FUD on Reddit talking about people saying they want to save the company and give them 2 billion shares so that they don't go bankrupt. That's all bullcrap. If they only have $65 million on the books, it's because they paid off a ton of debt and they paid for their building that's 10 times bigger than the building they're at now. If they only have $65 million, it's because they spent $300 million. Come on, people. The last 200 million shares of dilution have been for MULN financing. Like, those were MULN shares. We ain't never got an announcement about where they put that money. And we know it was at least 113 million shares. Updated back on June 2nd. And now they got their final 120 to 130 million shares. And we know that those are probably all gone by now too. And where's that money at? It'll come. They'll talk about it soon. And so, the point is, if we know that the vote's going to say no, like, that would just destroy the FUD. It would destroy the shills. And it would guarantee that even if it took another month or 3 months, it didn't matter, that retail owns the float. Retail decides every vote that they want to do, and that's power, and that's stuff that people would buy into. That's news that would go on TV. Retail denied dilution vote. They own the stock. So they're not I do not believe that they are going to let that happen. I do not believe that they are expecting that to happen. I think that from the beginning, the dilution vote was placed there as a method of creating FUD, and the squeeze happens before, and the dilution vote doesn't even matter. Nobody's going to think about the dilution vote if the vote's already, or if the squeeze has already happened. Now, because they waited so long up until the vote, there's probably going to be a lot of people that are still looking. Depending on how high the stock price goes, and depending, and if the dilution gets voted no, I might be interested in MULN. But one thing to consider is that if it does squeeze this week, everyone that got a vote are people who bought shares almost a month ago. So if it does squeeze, and a lot of them sell their shares, and they dump these into index funds, and the Russell 2000 finally has 200 million shares like AMC does, they may own the vote, and they may just bring up a new dilution proposal right away, and they may dilute the crap out of it. And so that's something to consider. But I believe that dilution vote was never intended to actually go through. And I believe that we squeezed before it. And I think their idea is that a lot of people will hold out their funds and wait to see what happens with that vote before the squeeze. Or not, but basically, if it votes no, then they would buy in. But right now they're scared of the dilution vote, and so maybe they're holding off funds. That's a sure sign that the squeeze is going to happen before the dilution vote, if you ask me. Sounds like someone that waited a hair too long. MULN is so certain, people. Oh. Yeah, I was just thinking.